Okay, Rick, so this is the audio setup I've decided to go with. So this is option 4. Hopefully you can hear my voice clearly. the podium.
Okay.
Because I had to tape in a different mic to make it work.
So will we be able to move?
Yeah, we can move
Yeah,
the
I think
podium.
that's probably the best. Okay. Yeah, so they can at least see
What they're doing.
Yeah.
That would be good.
Okay. And have you Betsy?
Is this even enough? Or this is probably not even enough for them?
Betsy. Betsy. I just want to make sure everything is sort of oriented and
Yeah,
you know,
do they need more?
You know what to do once you're up here.
Yes.
Oh, good?
Yes.
Okay. Who's
Do they?
who's moving the slides?
Sorry.
How's that happen?
That is a great question.
Hopefully they don't want you to trip over that wire.
Betsy, it's okay. Betsy.
Oh, I'm so
It's okay.
sorry.
People call me. At least you're not calling me Betty or something. Yes.
Do these need to be pushed back? Or are you going to be, because the person has to be here in order to be heard. He's both by the room and by TV. They basically got to be right there.
Okay. I think that's
So,
fine.
You're gonna
I just want to make sure you can see and gesture and do
Oh, yeah. It might be helpful to bring them up. Yep.
But you need to be able to see, right?
Yes.
You want to tip my tape? No.
Well,
What, you want it out there for?
I think they need a little bit more. Do we have any more to give?
Yes, we do. We got plenty to give. Put it where you want it.
So after this point, we have a whole new set of problems. So this is as much as we're gonna get. So I think this is what we got. Wow, that's a close-up. Everybody get ready. Thank you so much.
In your face.
Yeah, exactly. This is up close and personal with Revere TV right here. Oh, we don't need that anymore.
Oh, yeah, right there.
Yeah. Mr. DeVille, get ready for my close-up.
Oh, you don't need that anymore?
Nope. That was many an audio plan
Oh,
ago.
okay. Oh, well, good. Then we don't need that
As the
there.
world changes.
Oh, so we can bring all this back in here. Could be worse. Oh, no, I was coming the other way.
Oopsies. There we go.
Now we're good.
Safety officers.
All right, I think we're safe now, don't you?
I think this works. At least it's union ready.
This is theirs. I'll put this over here.
We're going to be starting the presentation in about 5 minutes.
You want to join us for beach one picture?
Who?
Beach one picture.
No, go ahead. I'm good. Thank you. Mr. Bryan, what's that? Hey, listen.
Yeah.
And I know I keep bringing it up, but I answer this in front.
Yeah.
Cigars and drinks, nothing in particular. So work it out.
You got my message? Yeah, we'll talk.
That's the slider that I'll put up.
Can I get a quick one?
Yeah. Oh,
Do you want to?
sure, yes. All right.
Yeah. This way, man.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. If I can have your attention, please take a seat. Good evening, and thank you all for being here tonight as we continue our work with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council and the city to develop Next Stop Revere, which is a comprehensive master plan that will define what we want the city to, what we want to see for our city over the next 10 to 20 years. Before I begin my brief remarks, I do want to thank a few people. I want to especially thank the folks from MAPC for their hard work, and the folks from the city, our city staff, who have done an incredible job. You may have seen Tech Lang, our city planner, running around like a crazy person. Thank you, Tech, for all the great work that you've done. I also want to recognize and ask our steering committee members to please stand up. I want to thank you for the work that you've done in taking the time and effort and energy out of your busy schedules to make sure that this process is as comprehensive as it can possibly be. These folks, the folks who are standing up, who are steering committee members, are in some ways ambassadors, and they've been an integral part of the work that you'll see not only on these slides, but here at the breakout sessions this evening. So thank you for all your work, and I truly appreciate it. I have to say, after the turnout that we had in January, which was amazing, I was incredibly encouraged and enthusiastic about that turnout, and it showed, to me, it showed truly how invested folks are in making sure that the city of Revere realizes its full potential. And tonight, we're planning, and we look forward to, and I look forward to hearing from all of you about your vision, especially around housing in our community, economic development, and our city's historic and cultural resources. I truly believe, and I talk about this a lot, but I truly believe that now is the time for Revere. We are uniquely positioned with all of the right ingredients to unlock incredible opportunities for our city and for the people of the city. And that includes thinking about and talking about sites like the Necco Candy Factory, former Necco Candy Factory, the Wonderland Dog Track, which I actually used to work at, and the opportunities that those sites present. And at the end of the day, I hope that a big part of the discussion that we have tonight, and especially the economic development discussion, gets us to think about the types of investments that we want to see in our city. And it's not only to drive job creation, but it's ultimately for our residents to build wealth. It's for the next generation of our city to build wealth. And so as mayor, it's my job, and it's important for me to make sure that as many people and every person that's in this room and that's in our city has the opportunity to live a great life in our city and has the ability to work in our city, raise a family, and build wealth. So this is, and I think you're all here tonight because you know that this is a special time for our city, and I'm grateful to have all of you here as we continue the work to make our city a great place to live. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Betsy Cowan. I'm with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. I'm one of the project managers along with my colleagues here. We're going to do a short presentation, and then you'll have an opportunity to break out into discussion groups, because that's really the main goal tonight, that you all can talk to each other and share ideas. So I'm going to go over the agenda briefly, and then we'll get into our presentation. So we're in the welcome section. We're going to do a brief presentation. Then you'll see in the back, and we'll give you instructions, and a little bit later in the presentation, we'll have the opportunity for you all to break out into discussions. And then we'll close. One important thing to note is that we want to get your feedback. Tonight is about getting your feedback on each of the topics that we're talking about and also on the event itself. So before you leave, we'll also hand out a quick survey. I know most people hate taking surveys. We love surveys because it gives us a sense of how we're doing. So please be sure to fill that out. Before I continue, I do want to let you all know that we do have interpretation tonight. This is a multilingual city, so we have interpretation into Spanish. So I'll just make a brief announcement. Para los que hablan español, si quieren interpretación, hay equipos de interpretación al frente en la entrada. It's very important for us to be able to offer interpreting. We also have all of our materials translated into multiple languages: Spanish, Portuguese, Haitian Creole, Khmer, and North African Arabic, because this, again, is a multilingual city. So there are many of you who came to the kickoff in January, so we just want to give a very brief reminder of what a master plan is. So basically, a master plan is a strategic document that really helps the city plan for its future. Now, the mayor mentioned the NECO site. There are many key development sites that are up for development in the future. And this really is the opportunity to think about the city overall. We won't be getting into the specific details of any site, but it's really an opportunity to think about the city as a whole. It's a unique opportunity with all of the changes. So what do we want to see in the city moving forward? So it's a vision, we set goals and strategies, and really then our role is to work with you all to develop an implementation plan so that it's not just a plan that sits on the shelf. I did want to just remind folks briefly of the process. So this takes about a year. So we started in January with a kickoff. Obviously, we've started working with the city staff earlier than that. And this is a process that has been a long time coming. There's been a lot of people that have been doing a lot of planning in the city, and this is the culmination of that. But we're now in the spring section, and it is spring even though it's 34 degrees outside. And this is the first of two forums. This one is focused on housing, economic development, and historic and cultural resources. There will be another forum on May 8th that's going to be focused on transportation and mobility, open space and recreation, sustainability, which is clean energy, climate resiliency, which is particularly relevant given the location, and public health. So that is May 8th. So mark your calendars. May 8th, we'll have a very similar format. And if you have questions about those areas that come up tonight, feel free to share them, but remember that we will have another opportunity for you to engage with that. The summer, we'll gather more community feedback. We'll start drafting the plan, and then in the fall, we'll finalize the plan. We're doing all of this in partnership with the city and with the steering committee that will be guiding us, and then we'll be getting your feedback. And then our goal is to present the final plan to the planning board in the in the early winter of 2020. So that's our overall process. So the presentation tonight, at the request of the steering committee and the city, we've been asked to go a little bit deeper into detail in each of the three areas. So I'll do a basic overview of the demographic information of the city very quickly. Then our goal, again, as consultants, is to just repeat back what you all have said to us, and then to help think through what that means and what that will mean for the city. So we had a kickoff in January, so I'll just share some of the key insights from that kickoff. There's much more information, but I'll share some highlights. Then I'll turn it over to our colleagues to talk about housing, economic development, and historic and cultural resources. So very briefly, and again, these boards are all up around the room, and I did want to just give a special thank you to all of the Revere Public School staff and the leaders here who have made this night possible in this space. So you'll be able to engage with this information, but very briefly, our first goal as part of the plan was to say what is happening in Revere and who lives in Revere. So what we've seen is that, first of all, the population is growing. You all know that, you feel that. It's over 53,000. Also, it's a very diverse population in terms of age, and that is unique. Some communities might skew one way or the other. You're fairly diverse in terms of the different age groups that are represented. We also, certainly this is a diverse community in terms of racial and ethnic background, and that's something that we look at, and we'll have a special conversation tonight about historic and cultural resources, and that is relevant to that conversation. And Alex later will touch on much more details behind the housing, but we're looking at the average household size. And then I did want to make a note, particularly because we are in a school, of what role education plays in the master plan. And this came up at the kickoff. Education obviously is really important. I was at the State of the City when one of your teachers was recognized for being a Teacher of the Year. And I know we have many graduates of Revere High School who are even working for the city. Education falls a little bit outside of the master plan because the master plan itself is designed to focus on land use. So how are we using the available land in the city? What structures should we build? How should we protect open space? Should we build mixed-use developments, commercial, residential? So education falls outside of that, but it's the foundation to what we're doing. It's the foundation to workforce development. It certainly has implications if we talk about family housing. That has implications for the schools. We know that there's interest in building a new high school. That has come up many times, and you'll see that. So education is not forgotten in the plan. It is outside of the plan, but forms the foundation. So we're happy to talk about that. If it comes up in the groups, please share, but it's slightly outside of the plan. And then finally, Alex will talk about this a little bit more, but we did analyze household income and then looking at how that affects life in the community. So Alex and Josh, who are talking about the housing and economic development portions, will address that. I did also want to make a note that we are comparing Revere to several different communities. And we have to say this in New England, every community is unique, and we know that. Revere is unique, and there are things that we can learn from municipalities that might be similar or close by. So right now we're comparing to Chelsea, Everett, Lynn, and Malden. Again, different communities, but they also have some things that we could learn from. And finally, because I've been using the term land use, we're looking at how the land is used. Is it used for residential purposes? Is it used for commercial purposes? This map is over there. You can see it in more detail. And that combined with the zoning, which is what is allowed in these different spaces, will then help us analyze what should be built there or what could be built in the city. And then are there potential changes, potential zoning recommendations or other things that should be changed as we move forward. So as I mentioned very briefly, we just want to give some information on the kickoff that we held in January. And as the mayor said, it was incredible turnout. I think we were expecting maybe 100, maybe 150, maybe 200 if we were lucky. And we had 225 people, which is a testament to your interest. It's a testament to the city staff. We also have a team that's working with us to engage the community, so it's a testament to our staff as well. And what we were particularly happy to see is that we're a number of people that took advantage of our interpretation services. For many folks, that is key to allowing them to be able to participate and to feel an equal part of the community. And then we also utilized free childcare, and that is really important. That could be a barrier for someone to participate. So we have that again tonight, and that was really important for us. So we had a great team that was taking photos, so you'll see, and you might see yourself in one of these photos. We really feel like it reflected the diversity of the city, and we would love to see even more people at future events. We had interactive stations where we asked people to say where they lived. And you'll see on this, we have people who have, it's a little bit hard to see on here, but people put dots where they live all the way from Point of Pines down to Shirley Ave and all throughout the city. So we had really good representation across the city. And then what we did, we love Post-its. We love getting feedback. And so our team collected all of the Post-its and then typed them all up. So write neatly, that helps. So we analyzed all of them and put them right back, so that's what we're sharing tonight. So just to let you know, they all got looked at, any comment got looked at, and then we're just going to share that right back to you all. So this is another example of how people provided feedback throughout the night. And so I just want to give a little bit of a summary then of, let's see, there we go. 2 main questions that we asked. And again, there were a series of questions that you'll see some feedback in each of the sections tonight. I'm just going to highlight the major questions that were asked. So one was, what topics do you want to see covered in the plan? And we typed them up, we analyzed all of them, and this was the list in order of most mentioned to least mentioned. So the one at the top is the most mentioned, and then it goes down from there. So affordable housing, green infrastructure, green space, traffic, safety, those were the most mentioned, and then the ones at the bottom were mentioned the least. And similarly, we asked a question, what are your key concerns? And these were the things, again, in order of most mentioned to least. Traffic, affordable housing, drugs, racism, those were mentioned the most. And then there were things at the bottom that were mentioned the least but still came up. So with that, I'm going to now turn it over to our three experts in housing, historic and cultural resources, and economic development. And they're going to talk about how the feedback from the kickoff is shaping now what we're going to do tonight. So I'd like to invite up Alex Koppelman.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alex Koppelman. I'm a regional housing and land use planner with MAPC. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the housing element of the master plan and housing conditions in Revere and what we heard from you about housing in Revere. And then I'm also going to tell you about some key housing terms and concepts so you can understand how they're used in the planning process. So we had a great amount of turnout at the kickoff meeting, as Betsy mentioned, and as she also mentioned, affordable housing was the #1 topic mentioned at this meeting. We heard a lot about why people like living in Revere. We heard that it's an affordable place that's close to Boston, close to transportation and amenities like the beach. And we also heard that it's a very diverse city. We also heard some concerns about the affordability of housing, particularly for families, and whether the new apartments at the beach are meeting the needs of the community. And we also heard about some concerns about potential displacement. And we also heard some concerns dealing with housing rights and landlord abuse and just a desire for more education on housing. So as we get ready to move forward in this planning process, I think it's really important to understand some key housing terms and concepts. So the first question that we often get is, what is considered affordable? So as a general rule, housing is considered affordable if it costs no more than 30% of the household's income. This allows that household to pay for other necessities such as food, transportation, and health care. If a household is spending more than 30% of their income on housing, it makes it more difficult to pay for these necessities, and so that household is considered cost burden. So in Revere, just under half of all owner households are cost burden, and just over half of all renter households are cost burden. So those are pretty high rates of cost burden among both owners and renters. So the thing I want to do now is really differentiate between market rate housing that is naturally affordable and deed restricted capital A affordable housing. So naturally occurring affordable housing is just housing that happens to be affordable based on the market price. So how do you get there? If you have a range of different housing types, it offers more opportunity for housing to be affordable and to meet the needs of different households and the different needs that they have. So I just want to say that Revere does have a diverse range of housing types, and that's good. And the city does expect a lot of new market rate housing units in the next few years, and that's exciting for a lot of reasons. We also need to think about other housing needs, which brings us to deed restricted capital A affordable housing. So deed restricted affordable housing is required to be affordable for income eligible households. And generally it does not cost more than 30% of the household's income. Who is eligible for deed restricted affordable housing? This is determined by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and it's based on the area median income, which includes the median income for both Revere and the surrounding communities in Greater Boston. So that number is $107,800, and if a household's making 80% of that figure, then they're eligible for deed restricted affordable housing. This figure does vary by household size, but for a 3-person household, it would be $73,000. So in Revere, there are 12,205 households that make less than 80% of the area median income, meaning they are eligible for deed restricted affordable housing. There are 1,780 units on the city's subsidized housing inventory, the majority of which are deed restricted affordable housing units. So if you do the math, for every 7 households that are eligible for deed-restricted affordable housing, there is 1 unit on the city's subsidized housing inventory. And it's important to understand that deed-restricted affordable units aren't always permanent. In some cases, that affordability and that requirement to be affordable can expire. And in fact, in Revere, there are 791 affordable units that their affordability could expire between now and 2050. And half of those units could have their affordability expire between now and 2026 if it's not extended. So that means that those units could potentially lose their affordability requirement and become market rate housing units. So the city is working on a variety of initiatives on housing at the moment. They are exploring partnerships to explore new housing models. They're working on a senior property tax exemption. And they're looking for funding that supports new homeowners and homebuyers loan programs. And you'll be able to learn more details about these initiatives at the boards when we come to our breakout session. And you'll be able to ask me any questions that you have about what I presented. So just to summarize, affordable housing was the #1 mentioned topic at the kickoff meeting. More than half of all households in Revere are eligible for deed-restricted affordable housing, but the supply of these units is limited. And several of these units are at risk of losing their affordability requirements. So next, we're going to look at the connection between housing and wages and employment. So I'm going to hand it over to Josh to talk about economic development. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Good evening, everybody. My name is Josh Eichen. I am an economic development planner with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and I'm going to talk about economic development in Revere. And I think the first question really is, what is economic development? Because it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I think for the purposes of our work in the discussion tonight, we're taking a very broad definition, understanding of what economic development is. So it can mean just building more stuff, more development in town. It can mean workforce training so that residents have access to better jobs. It can mean activating vacant spaces like the Necco factory or some of the opportunity sites in the city. It can mean hosting community events like the Sandcastle competition at Revere Beach. So it's very broad. Tonight, for the presentation, I'm going to focus on talking about the businesses, jobs, and wages, as well as some of the economic development and building development that's occurring in the city of Revere. So just to start, similarly, by recapping what we heard at the January kickoff meeting, there are 3 big categories that people really want to talk about. So people really want to talk about employment, interest in residents getting priority jobs at the hotels that are coming online in Revere, as well as some of the other businesses. People want to talk about wages. There was a concern that many of the businesses that operate in Revere that are large employers do not offer competitive wages. And then, as Betsy mentioned at the beginning, people really wanted to talk about traffic. Traffic came up a whole bunch, understandably. Revere is a commuting city, which we'll talk about more. But traffic is an issue. There's a preference for Revere residents to be able to work in the city instead of commuting elsewhere. The commuters who ride the train seem to love it, but folks who take the bus, I think there's some differing opinions about how well it functions. And just to stay on that topic of commuting, so it makes sense. People are concerned about traffic because the majority of Revere residents actually work outside the city. What we're illustrating here is that out of the 27,000 or so employees or workers that live in Revere, 21,000 commute outside of the city for their employment. About 1,600 stay in the city. They work and live in Revere. And then Revere is bringing in about 7,000 people to work within the city limits proper. So if we think about those folks who are commuting outside of the city, about 2/3 of them are driving, right? So it makes sense that there's traffic issues, traffic congestion. And 30% approximately are using public transit, either trains or buses. And then 6% or so walking, biking. So considering the commuting patterns and what businesses and jobs are available in Revere, one of the things that we've done as part of our research into economic development in the city is really understanding who are the major employers, where are they, and in what sectors are they offering jobs. And I understand it's a little difficult for folks to see maybe in the back, but what we're really seeing here is that the majority of the big employers in Revere are retailers. So the grocery stores, the cinema, those are accounting for the majority of the jobs in Revere proper. There is also some large healthcare employers, MGH, and then the senior care facility, and then there are also some additional industrial users who are offering sort of large employment bases in the transportation, wholesale trade, and waste management sectors. So that's what's here in sorry, and before actually I move on, I'll also mention that those are the big employers, but it's also important to note that the city of Revere is home to a very broad range of small businesses that are often, locally owned, locally operated, and community serving. So there are those sort of big anchor employers that are in those sort of top sectors, retail, et cetera, but then a very wide range and diverse range of small businesses in the city. So that's what's here in Revere, but we understand, as I mentioned in the first slide, that most Revere residents do not work in Revere. Most Revere residents work outside of Revere, and they find employment in a number of different industries. And so just one thing to quickly highlight here on this slide is that the industry sectors that Revere residents find employment in, the majority of folks find employment in industry sectors that pay either sort of middle of the range wages, as indicated by these black dots on the chart here, or lower wage ranges. So many folks in Revere work in the arts, entertainment, accommodation, and food service sector, as well as the retail trade sector. And then as you move further to the right towards the higher paying industry categories, there are less Revere residents working in those sectors. So now I'm going to try and tie it all together, the connection between economic development and housing and why it's important for us to consider this in the master plan. So thinking again about the jobs that are available in Revere and the wages associated with those jobs. So what we're seeing on this chart is, if I can find the thing here, the percent of all employees that are working Revere, the industry category that they are working in, and the monthly wage that they are earning. The different shades of the bar indicate different percentages of that wage category, and that'll be important in a moment. So what I'll highlight here is that the top three industry categories, retail trade, healthcare and social assistance, accommodation and food service, account for more than 50% of all the employees in the city of Revere. Those three industry categories also happen to be three of the lowest categories in terms of associated wages. And when you add in the median monthly rent of a one-bedroom apartment in Revere, you see that many of those sort of large employment categories are either unable to afford the cost of that median rent, or they're paying the majority of their monthly wage on that rent. And so again, this is a conversation starter, and we really hope that we can talk more about this, keeping in mind, but one, that most workers who come to Revere to work are not living in the city, but also thinking about what you all want for the future of your city. So I'll leave it there. So shifting gears, beyond the wages and industries and jobs that are held by Revere residents and that are available to folks who want to come and work in Revere, I think you can't talk about economic development in Revere without talking about hotels. Revere is slated to have 8 new hotels coming to the city for many obvious reasons. Its location, very close to Logan Airport. It's got the beach. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to be. But that new development is also a sign of change and really a sign of interest from the private sector. And so I just highlight here, the Shipwreck Lounge on Revere Beach is going to be something that looks quite a bit different. And I think the implication for that is that there are many sites, properties, in Revere that are being looked at by the development community. And we hope tonight that we can also talk about what you hope to see in the future of those sites. I mean, I think some of the big ones that are probably on your mind are the former Wonderland Racetrack, the NECO site has been mentioned. There are some properties along Ocean Parkway and elsewhere in the city that could be leveraged for further economic development in the city, and we really want to get your thoughts and input on what that looks like. So to wrap up, the city has a number of ongoing initiatives that are aimed at encouraging economic development within the city. There is a signage and storefront improvement program that's been really successful along Broadway, getting better signage for those businesses, attracting new customers. The city is actively working on a workforce development initiative. And the city is also investing in improving its accessibility to businesses and streamlining permitting processes, making it easier for entrepreneurs to do business in the city. So the key points that I'll leave with are Revere is home to a vibrant small business community. Recent losses in major employers has left a gap in employment, and development interest in Revere could be leveraged towards new economic development opportunities in the city. So that's the real nuts and bolts kind of economic development side. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Anis Sengupta, who's going to talk about arts and culture and historic resources, which has a direct correlation to economic development because it really has a lot to do with what makes Revere feel like a place.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everyone. I'm Anis Sengupta. I'm a senior arts and culture planner with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and I'm here today to talk to you about the historic and cultural resources element of the master plan. At MAPC, for the historic and cultural resources sections, what we look at are the historic development patterns of the community, the historic preservation activity and priorities, and then also look at the wider spectrum of arts and cultural activities and try to understand the identity of the place and the rich activity that is growing. What is really interesting and exciting about Revere, excuse me, is how history and culture are so closely interconnected here. Pop culture was a historic driver of economic activity in the city, and you have still religious and civic buildings, art and resources that were constructed by Revere's immigrant communities in the 19th and early 20th centuries that still provide the civic infrastructure that serve the Revere residents today. We got some great feedback from the January 15th kickoff related to historic and cultural resources. We heard how much Revere loves its diverse communities and cultures. We also heard some concerns about racism. We heard about a lack of cultural and recreational opportunities, especially for youth and seniors, and the need for more community gathering space. And we heard about a love of Revere Beach as a historic asset, as a regional destination, and as a unique open space. We also heard about a desire to strengthen its connection to environmental justice and promote its preservation in the face of climate change. Here I want to step back and talk a little bit about the parallels and differences between historic Revere and the Revere of today. One of the striking things about this 1903 map is it shows the extent of Revere's salt marshes during its early development. These marshes played an important role in the region's ecology, and their lasting traces continue to impact vulnerability to flooding and climate change. And they also have created some of the opportunity sites that continue to be areas of development and redevelopment. We can also see that Revere grew up along two major rail lines that provided transportation access to Revere's residents to the neighboring job centers in Boston and Lynn. Those major rail lines still exist today as the commuter rail in purple and the MBTA blue line. The blue line, which now ends at Wonderland Station, once extended all the way to Lynn. What is harder to see on the map is that Revere's neighborhoods were also served by a number of streetcars, most of which have been turned into the MBTA bus routes you know today. Those streetcar lines acted like a scaffold along which Revere's important civic and cultural resources were built, and they provided connections to East Boston and Chelsea. The dots that you see on the map are 128 resources that have been identified locally as historically significant. Those resources are clustered around streetcar neighborhoods and Revere Beach. 52 have been recognized by the state as historically significant through designation as National Register properties, National Historic Landmarks, and contributing elements to National Register historic districts along Revere Beach Parkway and Winthrop Parkway. These designations of historic significance are important for determining eligibility for preservation funding programs, but they do not attach any protections to those properties. In fact, only 2 of Revere's historic resources have preservation restrictions attached to them, and these are the Immaculate Conception Rectory, home to the Revere Society for Cultural and Historical Preservation, and the Slade Spice Mill. Revere continues to be a place where arts and culture thrive, and Revere's new immigrant communities are contributing to the vibrancy of the city's arts and culture activities, and many of these are among the small businesses that Josh mentioned as being kind of a driving force of Revere's economy. Revere's arts and cultural assets still cluster near historic civic and neighborhood centers and trace the edge of the beach. In the last 30 years, local efforts have helped to elevate Revere's history, while new immigrant communities have established new layers of cultural practices and expression. With Wonderland and Suffolk Downs and the many dance pavilions that used to line Revere Beach, Revere was historically a powerhouse for using culture as an economic driver. Today, many of those historic large culture and entertainment destinations are gone. Revere's creative economy is a small but interesting segment of current economic activity. Revere is home to 6 schools of dance or music. It has sound and video production companies, interior design service companies, and artists. As Revere redevelops its former centers of culture and entertainment, questions remain as to the role that arts and culture will play in Revere's future economic growth. The City of Revere has a number of initiatives to support history and culture in the city. They have provided financial and technical assistance support for the capital improvements to the Revere Historical Society building at 108 Beach Street. They have supported ongoing neighborhood beautification and public art through grants from the Revere Cultural Council, a citywide mural and public art program, and the program for art on utility boxes. And they're also leading a project through Neighbor Ways to support resident-led traffic calming initiatives. The city has also supported cultural festivals and placemaking initiatives, including co-sponsoring or providing in-kind support for annual events and block parties, including the Revere Fall Festival, the Shirley Ave Cultural Festival, the Beachmont Multicultural Festival, Moroccan Cultural Day, and the Summer Nights series. I'd like to close by emphasizing that Revere's historic development provides a template for the city as an affordable place for immigrant communities and other communities in Greater Boston to live, work, and play. And Revere's historic and cultural resources should be seen as assets that can help serve the needs of the city's diverse immigrant and ethnic communities. And it is important to remember that culture has historically been an economic engine for Revere, and it could be again. When we go into our breakout groups, I hope you will come to the Historic and Cultural Resources boards to look more closely at some of this data and engage in a conversation about your goals for this element of the plan. Thank you.
Good evening. So my name is Ralph Wilmer. I'm principal planner at MAPC, and I am one of the co-managers for the project. So I wanted to just sort of close the presentation, and you've heard from us. So now it's time for us to hear from you. So this is just one forum that we're having. As Betsy mentioned, we had one earlier. We have another one scheduled for 4 weeks from now, May 8th. And we're also going to be looking at a number of different avenues for getting your input. We're using social media, surveys, interviews with people. We're going to be doing focus groups. A lot of this stuff is going to be happening over the summer. So we want to make sure that we hear from you throughout the process, and we're offering a number of different ways in which that could be done. Another thing that has just launched is Next Stop Revere's website, where you can see up-to-date information about the planning process, information about some of the data that we've generated. A lot of the material that we've produced for these public forums will be posted. And you all here, if you want to take the website for a spin, you can go to the Learning Commons and take a look at the website. The address is on this slide, but it's basically the city's website, revere.org/nextstoprevere. So now I want to just go through what we're going to do the rest of the evening. We are looking to get your feedback on each of these 3 topics, and we'll have 2 discussion groups that you'll be able to attend that'll run for about 25 minutes each. So you may have noticed that your name tags have numbers on them. So we would like you to use those numbers to go to the corresponding breakout session that's on your name tag. So if you're number 1, you're going over there. If you're number 2, you're going straight back. Is that okay? So over there is economic development, number 1. Number 2 is historic and cultural assets. 3 is in the far corner over there, and it's housing. After about 25 minutes, we'll give you a cue that you should go to the next session that you want to go to, and you'll be able to self-select that, so you don't have to worry about the number on your name tag. And then toward the end, we'll give you an opportunity to take a look at all the boards, all the information that we have provided for you. Many of the slides that were on the presentation are duplicated on the boards that are in your various sessions. So with that, we're going to turn you loose to go to your first breakout group. And thank you very much for your attention.